All right, so this video is going to be about classifying bones. We'll start with classifying by shape. One thing you will notice is that with each of these classifications, the amount of compact versus spongy bone is going to be part of the definition. And so just make sure that you review that. Essentially, spongy bone's got all the little projections within it, and forces are dispersed throughout all those projections. Compact bone is dense and hard. It's what makes up the diaphysis of a long bone, and then spongy bone is found in the ends of a long bone, the epiphyses, okay, those epiphyseal regions. But anyway, that being said, for flat bones, they are generally thin and composed of two nearly parallel plates of compact bone, and they surround a layer of spongy bone. And then just as a reminder too, compact and cortical are interchangeable, and spongy and trabecular bone are interchangeable. I tend to use compact and spongy more because that's what I learned. So examples of flat bones: the ribs, the sternum, the bones of the skull, and then the clavicle and scapula. The clavicle is your collarbone that's on the anterior side of your body, and then the scapula is your shoulder blade, this triangular shaped bone that's on the back side of the body. When babies are in utero, okay, and developing, they have the need, of course, for the brain to still grow. They need to get out of the birth canal. And so that being said, the bones of the skull are still forming, but they also have fibrous connective tissue regions between them that are known as fontanelles. And so these are going to allow for the baby's head to be distorted as it moves through the birth canal. And then once the baby's born, it's going to continue to allow for the brain to grow. And then eventually those bones are going to completely harden or ossify, and the connective tissue regions are going to harden up some more as well and become much more fibrous once the brain is fully developed and the baby has been born. This anterior fontanelle that's labeled right here, that one is what we typically would call the soft spot on a baby's head, if you know anything about that, and I'll show you guys a model of a fetal skull to show you where that is. Okay, so the next category, long bones. So these are bones that are longer than they are wide. So they have the shaft known as the diaphysis, slightly curved for strength, and it absorbs stress. Because of that, they consist of mostly compact bone, and then the spongy bone is in the end regions, okay, the epiphyseal regions at the top and the bottom on this image. And that's again where stress is going to be dispersed, or forces are going to be dispersed throughout all of those little projections. If it's longer than it's wide, then it falls into this category, such as the humerus, the radius and ulna, so all the bones in what we know as our arm and forearm, all of your metacarpals that make up the palm of your hand, and your phalanges that make up your fingers. Then also the femur and the thigh, the tibia and fibula, and the lower leg. Okay, remember we said the leg is technically below the knee. All of the tarsals in the foot, and then tarsals are ankles. The metatarsals in the foot, and then the phalanges that make up your toes. The next category is short bones. So these are bones that are, as it says there, hang on, let me slide this in. They are nearly equal in length and width. So they often appear to be essentially cube-shaped, okay, kind of square. And I say that, and then they basically are not really very square in the grand scheme of things. But they are they're made of spongy bone, except for a really thin layer of compact bone that's at the surface. And so I guess mostly would have been fine to say there. So all the bones in the carpals, all of your carpals in your wrist, and then the tarsal bones in the ankles. Okay, and so there you can see the tarsals, and then the ankle, for example, that's the calcaneus. The talus is a really large tarsal bone, and then you have some other tarsal bones as well. And then irregular bones, these are bones that have some sort of complex shape and projection, and so essentially they don't fall into one of the other categories. The amounts of compact versus spongy bone are going to vary. So the bones that make up the pelvis, okay, your two coxal bones, and each of those bones is actually made of three separate bones, and then the sacrum, okay, and then the coccyx, which is the tailbone, which is essentially just the last couple of bones when you're looking at the vertebral column. All of the vertebral column bones in each different region, those are going to fall into this category as well. Okay, so then we've got the bones that are the exceptions, and those are sesamoid and wormian bones. So sesamoid bones are bones that are wrapped in tendons, like your patella, for example. That's really the only one that you're going to have to know. You have a bunch of sesamoid bones, like in the ball of your foot, but we really only focus on the patella. And then wormian bones. So these are little bones within the joints of our large bones that make up our skull. So that little yellow bone right there, sorry, I keep putting my pen over everything I'm going to show you. That little yellow bone, that's a wormian bone. And they're not always in the same place. They're not always the same size in people, but again, just an exception. So we've got short bones, long bones, flat bones, irregular bones, and then these two exceptions. That's all based on shape. We can also classify bones based on location. So they're either going to be classified as components of the axial skeleton or the appendicular skeleton. So the axial skeleton is what's shown in blue on this diagram at the bottom. And those, as it says, they consist of the bones that form what we know of as our central axis. So it's the skull, all the bones that make up the vertebral column, the sternum, the sternum or the breastbone, the ribs, and what's known as the hyoid bone. The hyoid is a unique bone. It's a little horseshoe-shaped bone that does not articulate with any other bone. It's basically way up in your neck. You can't feel it because it attaches to muscles. One of the things it specifically attaches to is the tongue, and so it plays a role in speech, but it doesn't articulate with any other bone. And then, so that central axis in blue, that's the axial skeleton. And then the appendicular skeleton, this includes the bones of the arm, okay, the hip, the leg, and then the shoulder girdle as well, because I didn't mention that. So you've got clavicle and scapula, humerus, radius and ulna, the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Then you've got the two coxal bones that make up the pelvis. And again, each coxal bone is made of three separate bones called the ilium, the ischium, and the pubic bone or the pubis. And then the femur, the patella, the tibia and the fibula, the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges. If you have any questions about this one, let me know.